Hello, this is Lisa, CEO of Site for Wight, welcoming you to this week's Talking News on Saturday the 25th of June 2022. I'm delighted to report that we've had confirmed an order for over 30 of our Hello Everyone QR codes. These QR codes will be dotted across the island at various sites. The aim of the codes is to give people an unaided, audible guide to access buildings and areas so that those of us living with sight loss are able to enjoy them as much as others and be able to access them, hopefully unaided. The QR codes are also used to turn the written word audible. So, for example, if you're in a pub and there is a menu, wouldn't it be great to scan a QR code and the menu play back to you so that you don't have to rely on someone else to choose your menu for you or offer you a few options? If you know anyone that this may be of use to, please don't hesitate to contact the office and we'll be able to put each other in touch. Looking forward to a lovely sunny weekend. Thank you, Lisa, CEO, Site for Wight.
Hello, this is Steve reading a story from Island Echo, headlined, Man arrested over attempted murder, of his wife remains in hospital. A man arrested on suspicion of attempting to murder his wife at their family home in Binstead on Monday remains in hospital, Island Echo can reveal. Investigations into Monday's incident on Newnham Road are continuing, with a heavy police presence still outside the address, with detectives seen coming and going as colleagues maintain a scene guard around the property and two vehicles on the driveway. Forensic examiners from the mainland arrived in Binstead on Monday afternoon and have been taking swabs and photographs from inside the home to help piece together the shocking events which have left a woman with serious head injuries. As previously reported by Island Echo, armed police descended on the usually quiet residential road at around 11:15 following reports of a serious assault. Witnesses told Island Echo that a woman was seen to be bleeding profusely, with armed officers calling for a male inside the address to put down a weapon and open the front door. The road was sealed off as police isolated the threat and made the scene safe to allow paramedics to move in. The Thames Valley Air Ambulance was also scrambled to the scene, but was stood down whilst overhead. Medics tended to the injured female and conveyed her to St Mary's Hospital, with medical attention also given to the male suspect. He was placed in a neck brace and handcuffs before also being conveyed to St Mary's under police escort. Hampshire Constabulary has not yet commented on the specifics of the injuries sustained and whether a weapon was involved. They have, however, confirmed that the attempted murder suspect remains under arrest in hospital.
This is Den reading an article from On the Wight. Safer alternative to glyphosate approved by Vintner Town Council, but at a cost. Although councillors approved use of a new, safer alternative, question marks were raised about its use in Vintner Park, which would see an increase in costs of £5,000. Switching to a safer alternative than a chemical weed killer in Vintner will cost its town council 10 times more a year. In April, Vintner Town Council, VTC, banned the use of glyphosates in all non-ornamental areas of the town under its control after the weed killer was reintroduced by Island Roads. While the makers of glyphosates say it is safe to use, there have been concerns and bans on the product in various parts of the world. The reintroduction of glyphosate causes issues within the town, including the potential effect it may have on wall lizards, and led to VTC looking at alternatives. At its meeting last week, VTC agreed to go ahead with the introduction of a safe alternative to glyphosate, but at a £1,171 increase price tag. Glyphosates had previously been used in 9 areas of the town at a fee of £129, with its use only once a year. Now, the safe alternative would cost the council £260 for one application, but have to be applied up to 5 times a year to have the same effect as the chemical weed killer. This would see the cost increase from £129 to a potential £1,300 a year. The increase has been approved by VTC, but councillors raised question marks around the safe alternative use at Vintner Park. To switch to the alternative at the park, costs would rise from £356 a year for the glyphosate use to £1,068 for one application, or under the same logic it would need to be treated 5 times, £5,340. That would mean an increase in fees to the council and residents of £4,984. Councillor Steve Crockett said the increase was an unacceptable use of public money, and while he would like to see the use of glyphosates finished completely, that potential increase at this current time does not work. Councillor Brian Lucas said it was a moral dilemma about how much money you put against a principle. He said the money has to sit comfortably within the council's affordability, and he did not see that was the case. The council agreed to speak to its grounds maintenance contractor to find out more and if the figure could be negotiated.
This is Michael reading an article from Ireland Echo. East Cowes car park to see cashless parking introduced despite local objections. Cashless parking charges will be introduced to an East Cowes car park despite local opposition and a potential future housing development. The Isle of Wight Council's Cabinet came to an agreement on Monday evening to implement fees at the Maresfield Road car park in East Cowes, just like any other council car park across the island. Going against officer recommendations, however, to introduce the fees as soon as possible, making the authority £4,000 in a year. Councillor Phil Jordan, the Cabinet Member for Transport and Highways, added a caveat. He said the report had not made it clear the site was earmarked for housing under the Social Prosperity Fund that in a couple of years' time would have to be built, and while he recommended the charges be introduced, it would be subject to a project assessment, takes into account the time frame for the housing to be delivered, working out how long the land would remain a car park. According to the deal with Homes England, the Isle of Wight Council has until 2024 to develop the site, which includes Venture Quays and the Albany Barracks, or the land would have to be sold back for £1. This could mean parking charges are only introduced for the next 18 months. Councillor Jordan said in the 3 months it has already taken to bring the charges forward, the council would only make £3,000 in fees, and it was spending money in officers' time and effort to potentially return very little. With the council under significant financial pressure, other cabinet members pointed out every penny the authority can make counts. The proposal had been met with considerable concern. Councillor Carl Love for East Cowes said, with a petition from 75 local employees object to the change, they argued the loss of fee parking would impact local residents and motorists would park on surrounding residential streets instead, but council officers insist there is no evidence of this. To avoid set-up fees, vehicle users will only be able to pay for parking via their phone. Between 8 a.m. and 1800, the new parking fees will be £1.70 up to an hour, £2.90 1 hour to 2 hours, £4.80 for 2 hours to 4 hours, £6.20 4 hours to 6 hours, and £9 for £6 to 10 hours.
This is Patrina reading from Isle of Wight Radio. Amazon World mourns loss of rare twin panda cubs. Rare twin panda cubs born at Amazon World on the Isle of Wight have died. Red panda Yokse Ying gave birth to the sisters on the evening of May 31st. The team at the zoo park had been preparing for their arrival for many months prior. Staff have described the loss as a huge blow and say they are absolutely devastated. One of the cubs passed away in the early hours of Thursday, June the 2nd, at 2 days old. The cub, a little girl, weighed in below the 100-gram expected birth weight of a baby pandas. The second, also a girl, died at 13 days old. A statement from Amazon World reads, "Both cubs and the Exio appeared bright and strong after birth, and we were pleased that both the cubs were seen in a correct position for suckling." Sadly, one of the cubs passed away in the early hours of Thursday, the 2nd of June, at 2 days old. The cub, a little girl, weighed in below the 100 grams expected birth weight of a baby panda. Yaxio spent all her time in her nest box, looking after her other cub. The cub was seen regularly suckling and appeared to be developing well, growing in size, becoming more vocal, and moving around the nest box more and more each day. Although keepers understand the risks within the first few weeks, we watched with anticipation as the little cub was growing and the female was doing everything correctly. Senior keepers continued to check the nest box cameras through the night to check all appeared well. On the evening, the 12th of June, Yaxio became very distressed after monitoring her on the cameras, as it was apparent that sadly the second cub, also a little girl, had passed away at 13 days old. Although keepers try and prepare themselves for occasions like this, it always comes as a blow, and our staff are extremely upset by this loss. Yaxio continues to spend much of her time in her nest box, moving the bedding around, and continues to look for her cubs. It will take time for her to settle, and keepers will continue to monitor her closely over the next few weeks.
Hi, this is Steve reading a story from Isle of Wight Radio, headlined "Sex Offender Who Attacked Woman on the Isle of Wight Recalled to Prison." A registered sex offender who attacked a woman on the Isle of Wight has been recalled to prison and given an extra sentence for breaching the conditions of his licence. Ian Willett, aged 23, had been jailed last year for 40 months for sexual assault, assault by beating and kidnap. This followed an incident on the 23rd of August 2020, where he attacked a woman at Newport bus station and dragged her towards Church Lytton Park. The woman was bravely able to fight back and get away. After his release from prison, Willett was subject to licence conditions to stay at approved premises in Waterlooville. In addition, as a condition of his sex offender notification requirements, he was required to inform police of any change of address within 3 days, including if he was of no fixed abode, and to register any online usernames with police. On June the 5th this year, he absconded from his approved premises, and police also determined that he had created online usernames which he had not registered with police. Officers conducted inquiries to locate him, and on June 15th, an appeal was issued to the public to assist in finding Willett. As a result of information from the community, Willett was arrested on the Isle of Wight the same day and was charged the following morning with 2 counts of breaching his sex offender notification requirements. In addition to this, he was recalled to prison for breaching his licence conditions to serve the remainder of his previous sentence. He appeared at Isle of Wight Magistrates Court on Thursday, where he admitted the notification requirement breaches and was handed an additional 8-month prison sentence. Willett was also ordered to pay £85 in costs, and a £128 victim surcharge. Acting Detective Inspector Mark Edis said, "We are very grateful to the local community who supported our efforts to locate Willett after he absconded. It's because of information from the community that we were able to find and arrest him so quickly, within a few hours of a wanted appeal being issued. Licence conditions and notification requirements are legally binding and are put in place to protect the public by ensuring individuals do not reoffend. There are, of course, those individuals, like Willett, who show absolute disregard for this. We invest significant resources into the management of sex offenders and protection of the public and take this duty very seriously. We hope that the swift action taken by police reassures the community of this and that we will make every effort to put those who still choose to offend right back where they belong, in prison."
This is Den reading an article from Island Echo. Chinese bowls fetch £132,000 at auction just weeks after another bumper sale. A pair of Chinese Qing Dynasty bowls went under the hammer for a whopping £135,000 at HRD auction rooms in Brading this week. The bowls were listed as having a Yongzheng mark on the base with green dragon, red dragon and exotic bird decoration. Measuring just 15 centimetres in diameter and 6.5 centimetres high, the bowls are not massive in size, but they certainly attracted a large interest from collectors. The hammer finally went down at £135,000 when the bowls appeared at auction on Tuesday. No guide price was given. A second pair of Chinese Qing Dynasty bowls with a Duao Guang mark sold for £41,000. It comes just weeks after a Chinese pot with a £500 guide price sold for £152,000. A second bowl was also sold on the same day for £42,000. It means that in the past month alone, HRD has sold in excess of £370,000 worth of Chinese pottery.
This is Michael reading an article from Island Echo. Permission given for 50 homes to be built on land at Puckpool. Plans for 50 homes at Puckpool have been given to the go-ahead despite more than 180 objections and claims it would destroy the area. 18 months since the plans were first submitted for the former Harcourt Sands Holiday Centre golf course on Puckpool Hill, the Isle of Wight Council's Planning Committee has approved outline plans. Under the permission, the access to the site and the principle of development have been approved, with other aspects, layout, scale and design, to be decided at a later date. The lack of information in the application, however, caused concern for some members of the Planning Committee, with calls to defer until more details were submitted. However, members were told an outline application had different rules, but they did request the application be brought back to the committee when developers RJB SIBA Trust applied for further permissions. The scheme was approved in a tight vote on Tuesday night, with 5 councillors in favour and 4 against. Along with objectors, problems with the application were raised by committee members about road safety, the impact on wildlife, including the rare grey long-eared bat, overdevelopment of the site, and the loss of space between Ryde, Nettlestone and Seaview. There were also concerns about the urbanisation of the area, but councillors pointed out the site was surrounded by development and had once been part of a thriving holiday camp. As the Isle of Wight Council currently fails to meet government housing targets, the harm of the application would have to demonstrably outweigh the benefits of providing housing. With the scheme potentially providing up to 18 affordable properties and 32 market houses, the development was supported, but with caveats that a zebra crossing is added across Puckpool Hill to increase road safety for residents, and 80% of the affordable properties would be rented, with the remaining 20% available for shared ownership.
This is Patrina reading from Isle of Wight Radio. Boat sinks and 2 rescued after fire off Isle of Wight. A boat burned and sank after catching fire on the Solent off the Isle of Wight. 2 people had to be rescued from the burning vessel. Rescue teams, including Bembridge RNLI, were first alerted at 3:22 p.m. on Sunday. Black smoke could be seen from the island. The vessel's skipper had declared a mayday after flames broke out on board. Gosport Lifeboat's volunteer crew were training in Haslar Marina when they heard the call for help issued on VHF Channel 16 and immediately started to make their way towards the casualty vessel. On scene within 6 minutes, they found the people on board in life jackets, standing on the outer edges of the vessel as flames started to take hold inside. 2 nearby yachts had also responded to the call and were standing by, but could not get close enough due to the sea state and plumes of smoke. Gosport Lifeboat quickly recovered both people to the safety of the lifeboat and then took the vessel under tow, away from the busy shipping channel and into shallower waters. Shortly after the tow commenced, flames from the engine room completely engulfed the cabin, so Gosport Lifeboat crew deployed an anchor, with assistance from Bembridge RNLI Lifeboat, to prevent the vessel from drifting and becoming a greater hazard. Bembridge RNLI Lifeboat took the casualties into the warmth of their cabin and returned them to Chichester Harbour, where the vessel had been based. Meanwhile, Gosport Lifeboat remained on scene to keep inquisitive passing vessels at a safe distance, as flares and gas cylinders on board had started to explode. Duty coxswain Peter Byford said, "Thankfully, we were on duty with the lifeboat today and out training, as it was only a matter of minutes from our arrival until the vessel was completely engulfed in flames." The crew on board the vessel had done everything they should, immediately calling for help, wearing their PPE equipment, and being ready for the lifeboat to arrive. The duty fire tug, SD Independent, was tasked to come from Portsmouth Harbour to fight the fire with its powerful firefighting apparatus. Unfortunately, with flames completely engulfing the vessel, it was unable to be saved and sank shortly afterwards. Gosport Lifeboat then assisted the tug in retrieving the fuel tanks, which had been carrying 1,800 litres of diesel and other debris from the sunken vessel to minimise any environmental damage.
Hi, this is Steve reading a story from Island Echo, headlined 2 dead deer that attempted to swim across the Solent wash up at Fort Victoria. A pair of deer were found on the beach at Fort Victoria in Yarmouth earlier this week, despite their breed not being native to the Isle of Wight. After receiving a report from a local dog walker via the park ranger that there were 2 deceased deer, namely a male and female Reeves muntjac deer, on the shore at Fort Victoria, speculation grew as to whether they drowned whilst swimming over from the mainland. Reeves muntjac deer are not known on the island in any great numbers, and are not known to be established here, although sightings have been made, meaning that 2 washing up on the shoreline is even more confusing. Neil Reid at the Isle of Wight Reptilarium said, "Only a few weeks ago, we saw a photograph of another deer swimming over to the beach here at Fort Victoria, and we assumed that one made landfall and dispersed, but it looked bigger than a muntjac. The stretch of sea between Fort Victoria and the mainland is only 1.5 miles, and the deer must think it's a river and see the trees on the other side and believe they can make a swim for it. The other scenario is for some reason these two found themselves in the water on the other side, drowned, and the tide carried them. Given the evidence for deer swimming over, we think the first scenario is the most likely. Sadly, these two didn't make it. Upon investigating, we could see that one was a young male muntjac and the other a female. There is often speculation as to how the island could possibly have wild deer, given we have a deer-free status. Not native to the UK but introduced to Woburn Abbey in Bedfordshire back in the 19th century, subsequent escapes have led to them becoming established in the UK. Since 2019, they have been placed on the invasive alien species list, making it illegal to release them into the wild, and they can only be kept under licensed conditions. All wildlife sightings can be recorded on a website called iRecord, and that's at www.irecord.org.uk.
This is Den reading an article from Island Echo. Council issue £4.6 million reimbursement to help keep Southern Vectus running. The Isle of Wight Council is paying Southern Vectus £4.6 million to help keep the service going as it continues to recover from the effects of the COVID-19 pandemic. The reimbursement to the major bus operator was agreed upon at the Council's Cabinet meeting on Monday night, as numbers using public transport remain low. While Southern Vectus say it is back to operating 100% of its bus mileage levels, and even above, the reported number of passengers is only up to 80% of the levels they were in 2019. The Isle of Wight Council, in line with the Department of Transport's alternative COVID-19 recovery strategy, will now reimburse bus operators until the end of March next year, based on the levels of service it provides and the number of concessionary fares. For example, if Southern Vectus ran 80% of its services, it would receive 80% of the concessionary fares. In the financial year coming, the Isle of Wight Council has worked out, based on previous year's figures for more than 3 million passengers paying a concessionary fare, it will pay £4,691,602.09 to Southern Vectus. Cabinet also agreed to develop a business case with the potential to ring-fence funding to see whether further money would be necessary to maintain the level of service. There were concerns in County Hall Chamber that the reduced passenger numbers could lead to a reduction in services, particularly in rural areas. Councillor Jordan said it was an ongoing concern, but the authority was committed to the recently introduced enhanced partnership between the Isle of Wight Council and Southern Vectus and the resulting bus service improvement plan. The partnership missed out on government funding to deliver the improvement plan, but Councillor Jordan said some of its aspirations would be delivered. Operators of the community buses, the West Wight's Fight Bus and Vintner's Service 31, will also receive financial support.
This is Michael reading an article from Island Echo. Tree planting celebrates 50 years of Vintner Botanic Gardens. Isle of Wight High Sheriff Kay Marriott was joined by friends, volunteers and staff from Vintner Botanic Garden to plant a tree in commemoration of the garden's 50th anniversary earlier this week. The garden, then named Steep Hill Pleasure Gardens, opened on the 21st of June 1972 with a ceremonial tree planting by Lord Louis Mountbatten, and since then has become a much-loved public garden celebrating the unique microclimate of the Undercliff. Much has changed during the last 50 years, not only within the garden but more widely with climate change governing what's possible to grow outdoors. At the inaugural meeting, a fastigiate oak was planted, and 50 years later, largely due to the warmer microclimate, a palm tree marks the occasion, just a stone's throw from the original tree's location. The new addition enhances the already large national collection of palms at Vintner Botanic Garden. Garden curator Chris Kidd said, "With a history and ethos of planting at the very edge of hardiness, reflecting a changing climate, it made sense to push ahead with the riskiest palms available as we enter the second decade of the second millennium." Gardener Keith Brewer, who was present at the original opening of the garden, joined the celebrations on Tuesday and spoke of the changes he himself has seen over the last 50 years. "Much of the garden was very low-level planting in my day. It's certainly grown to some height over the years, and much has changed, largely due to the changing weather." Keith mentioned the two great hurricanes, the coming and going frosts, and the increasing temperatures the garden has seen, all contributing to the ever-changing appearance. High Sheriff Kay Marriott thanked the friends and volunteers for their hard work. The Vintner Botanic Garden Friends Society has tirelessly supported the garden and is responsible for funding many of the projects, including this newest palm collection. Samphire dancers share their latest dance works at Vintner Botanic Gardens. A couple of months ago, Samphire dance groups from Newport and Vintner were asked to take part in the 50th anniversary celebrations. Using the gardens as a stimulus, Samphire created 4 dances for this week's event, one inspired by the sights and sounds of the gardens simply entitled "In the Garden." Another, "Breath," takes its inspiration from the fact that Vintner Botanic Garden is on the site of the former National Cottage Hospital for consumption and diseases of the chest. And 2 other rather silly pieces, "On the Bench," showing caricatures of people that you might sit next to on the park bench. Michelle Hainsworth, director of the group, says, "It has been such a pleasure dancing and performing in the gardens. They are a beautiful backdrop. On Monday, we even had a red squirrel dance with us."
This is Patrina reading from Isle of Wight Radio. Rupert the donkey said to be doing well and stable. Rupert the donkey, who was rushed over to the mainland from the Isle of Wight on Monday night, is said to be doing well. The island community came together after a desperate plea was put out by the Isle of Wight Donkey Sanctuary to get him to the mainland. It was feared that Rupert may not have made it through the night if he wasn't transferred for specialist care. Whitelink stepped forward to offer the sanctuary a space on a ferry from Fishbourne. The Isle of Wight Donkey Sanctuary issued the following update. After his first night at Liphook, we have been told that Rupert is doing well so far. He is stable and being continuously observed in expert hands. So far, we have been able to avoid the emergency surgery, and we are hopeful we can keep it that way, but only time will tell. We will keep all of you updated when we get further feedback from Liphook on his condition. We still cannot express our thanks to you all enough. The reason that he is doing so well is because we were able to get him there in time. The way the community came together to help and support one of our donkeys is amazing and truly heartwarming. Jim Bob, our professional traveller, accompanied Rupert over to Liphook and has been spending his time checking out the thoroughbred horses and telling them that they might be expensive, but he is from the castle. We are all remaining hopeful for Rupert and keeping our fingers crossed. We will update you all again soon.
Hi, this is Steve reading a story from Island Echo, headlined, Fuel Thieves Continue to Target Coaches in Shanklin. Hundreds of pounds worth of diesel has been stolen from the fuel tank of a coach in Shanklin, the third such incident in recent weeks. It's said that the theft occurred when the commercial vehicle was parked at Winchester House Longstay Car Park in Shanklin overnight, Monday into Tuesday. As previously reported by Island Echo, around 600 to 700 litres of diesel were stolen from the tanks of a coach parked in the same car park off Sandown Road on the 8th to the 9th of June. Police have been made aware of the incident. A local has told Island Echo, "This is awful and really affecting people's livelihoods. If this continues, coaches won't want to park here."
This is Den reading an article from Island Echo. Drugs seized and arrests made as High Harm Team continue to target local criminals. The Isle of Wight's High Harm Team has been developing intelligence to target drug suppliers on the island, which has led to a number of arrests being made and drugs taken off the streets in the past week. On Sunday, officers paid a visit to an area of Shanklin that is said to be frequented by local drug dealers. A male was stopped and searched on Regent Street, with searches of 2 nearby properties also carried out. An amount of cash and the Class B drug cannabis were seized. An 18-year-old man and a 19-year-old man were arrested on suspicion of being concerned in the supply of Class B drugs. They have both since been released from custody, but remain under investigation. A raid was also carried out at an address in Monks Lane, Freshwater, last Thursday, 16th of June, where a small amount of Class A and Class B drugs were located, as well as cash. Investigations continue. As well as targeting drug dealers, the High Harm Team will be maintaining a focus on targeting knife carriers and anyone who possesses offensive weapons. Last Wednesday, an off-duty police officer detained a 14-year-old boy on Woodland View Ride who was suspected of carrying an imitation firearm as well as possessing cannabis. He was interviewed voluntarily under caution for these offences and inquiries continue. Superintendent Jim Pegler, Isle of Wight District Commander, has said, "Our proactive High Harm Team has already been busy and working hard to pull pieces of intelligence together that have been coming in from the community and have been targeting affected areas and perpetrators. I want to be clear to anyone on the island who is involved in drugs supply, who carries a knife, a weapon, a firearm, whether it's real or not, if you intend to use this for criminal purposes, then we are going to take action. We want our communities to please keep reporting information to us, as this intelligence is key to informing our operational activity. Depending on what's reported, you may not see an immediate police response, but I can reassure you we will be working behind the scenes to pull the bigger picture together."
Before we start the second part of the Talking News, here is this week's Society's News, which is read by me, Morris.
And me, Madeline.
Swimming is held every Monday at Medina Leisure Centre in Newport between 1:30 and 2:30, and the charity has the whole use of the pool, and the cost is £5 plus transport if required. Coffee and chat is on every Wednesday at Millbrook House from 10 a.m. to 11:30. It's only £1 for cake and coffee. Please come along for a chat, and members of staff will be there for any assistance with equipment and information. Striders is on Friday the 1st of July. Please call Susan if you wish to attend. The stride is from the Buddle Inn in Knighton around St Catherine's Lighthouse and back to the pub for lunch. The cost is £3 and £2.50 for transport if required.
The Royal Victoria Yacht Club Open Day is on Saturday. Those attending will receive further information this week. Hopefully everyone will have a nice time and the weather will be kind to you. We've now started preparing for Newport Carnival on July the 23rd, and we would love our members, staff, volunteers and families to take part in the parade. The carnival starts at 7 p.m. and the route is around 2 miles. But don't worry if you're unable to walk that far. You can sit in the minibus or car and wave to the crowds promoting the charity. We would like representatives of all our activities to take part and show the Isle of Wight what we do and how we help islanders living with sight loss. If you would like to join us, please call either Susan or Jasmine for more details.
I have a headline here that reads, Fantastic Festival. Wet Leg's performance at the Isle of Wight Festival on Sunday afternoon drew a crowd so big that the big top had to be closed around 10 minutes before they started playing. Those unable to get in to watch them play probably outnumbered those who had arrived early enough to bag a place, despite the big top being a long trek from the main stage where UB40 were playing. The local band, fronted by Ryan Teasdale and Hester Chambers, saw their first album shoot straight to number 1 in the UK and Australia and number 4 in the USA, with success in many other countries around the world. Ryan and Hester are joined by 3 other young islanders, Ellis Durand on bass, Henry Holmes on drums and percussion, and Joshua Mubaraki on guitar and synthesizer. It was obvious the band was excited to be playing to their home crowd, saying they were looking forward to sleeping in their own beds and leading a spirited rendition of Happy Birthday to Ryan's stepdad, Roger, celebrating his 70th birthday. Today, which was Friday, they are playing at Glastonbury, and there are more dates in the UK and Europe before heading off to Australia in July, followed by the USA and Canada. The festival itself was a glorious riot of music and entertainment for all ages. Even the weather turning unreasonably cold on Saturday didn't quell the crowd's enthusiasm for enjoying themselves. Next year's Isle of Wight Festival dates have been announced as June the 15th to the 18th, and early bird tickets are available at isleofwightfestival.com.
Half marathon to raise money for 6-year-old. Scott Howard will be walking a half marathon, that's 13.25 miles, across the island to fundraise for his 6-year-old great-nephew Josh, who has been diagnosed with metachromatic leukodystrophy, also known as juvenile MLD. Josh was having difficulty with his mobility, and after several tests and scans, the diagnosis of juvenile MLD was confirmed. It's an extremely rare and life-limited condition, affecting around 1 in 140,000 children. Unfortunately, there is currently no known cure for the rare disorder. Scott is raising money to support Josh with anything he might need, and to create as many happy memories as possible before his condition deteriorates further. He will also be donating to charities including Make-A-Wish and Shooting Star Hospice, who are supporting Josh. The walk will start at Sandown and after 13.25 miles will finish in Ryde. Scott has been able to organise the fundraiser with support from his employer, South Western Railway. There will be refreshments at the end of the walk supplied by the Island Line team at Ryde Station. The walk will take place on Sunday, that's June the 26th, starting at approximately 10 a.m. in Sandown. Anyone is welcome to join in with the walk to support and help raise awareness. Scott will be walking in fancy dress and encourage others to do so, with the theme of superheroes or favourite characters. You can also donate and find out more on the GoFundMe page, bit.ly/IWO Josh Superwalk.
Conservatives' housing ideas. The Conservative group at County Hall has put forward proposed changes to the Isle of Wight's future planning framework. The council failed to meet the government's housing delivery test from 2018 to 2021 and is now under a presumption of sustainable development, meaning the council has reduced power to resist inappropriate developments. The council is working to produce a new island planning strategy, IPS, which would help the council fight to lower the island's housing targets and return decision-making powers to the planning committee. Conservative councillors are now offering to work with the Alliance administration to agree amendments to the IPS. A paper, published by Tory group leader Councillor Joe Robertson, sets out a number of proposed changes. The most significant is building more affordable homes on a part council-owned brownfield site in Newport, relocating 360 homes currently allocated in Bembridge and Freshwater. Councillor Robertson said, last summer the newly formed Alliance administration published a revised version of the IPS, drawing on feedback from the previous Conservative administration's consultation. This was an improvement on the early 2019 proposals, but concerns remain. Whilst the Conservatives did not secure a majority in last year's elections, 18 of the 39 councillors were elected on a pledge to redevelop public sector land, including council-owned property, to deliver an ambitious regeneration of Newport Riverside. Adjusting the IPS to allow for a Newport Riverside allocation would be in line with agreed budget priorities. We are proposing that the council should designate all the part of the site it owns as affordable and retain ownership of most homes built for affordable rent. This would deliver an even greater number of affordable homes than the 2021 IPS draft. The Alliance administration should intensify discussions with the Ministry on Justice about the acquisition of the Camp Hill site for housing. This should be brought forward as a priority. Councillor Warren Drew, Tory policy spokesman, added, it is widely recognised that there is an affordable housing crisis on the island, particularly of genuinely affordable homes to rent. Unfortunately, the national definition of affordable homes, 80% of the market prices, is still far from affordable for most island residents. We want to see a local definition of affordability based on the income of island residents and their ability to pay. A member of the Alliance group said that although there were some positive aspects to the proposals, there was no evidence given to support the change to housing allocations and, even if the evidence could be found, it would delay the progression of the document by a further 12 months. He said that without such evidence, the plan would be rejected by the Planning Inspectorate out of hand. He added, this is an attempt to buy the votes of 3 councillors to give a political advantage to Tory leader Joe Robertson.
College students create enrichment pieces for primates at Monkey Haven. Animal management students from the Isle of Wight College recently created a range of enrichment pieces for the primates at Monkey Haven. Sarah Pullman, animal keeper, visited the Isle of Wight College to discuss what type of enrichment is used at Monkey Haven and focused on what they could make out of rope and animal-safe wood. Sarah then delivered a workshop to teach the students how to create their own enrichment pieces. She said, we made hanging wood feeders for the marmoset's gum and for the use of other primates. Several ladders were made using wood and rope, and the students were very creative, finding different ways to tie, knot and weave the rope to make hammocks. We also made bottle feeders for all the primates by threading rope through large plastic bottles. The capuchins love their rope hammock and are always playing on it. I did warn the students it may not last long, though, as the capuchins are experts at destroying things. All animals have evolved distinct patterns of behaviour, and the inability to engage in these behaviours can cause the animals to be frustrated and bored, which can eventually lead to stress and the development of abnormal behaviours. Enrichment is a crucial part of caring for animals, as it increases the opportunities for the animals to express their normal patterns of behaviour. The primary goals of enrichment are to reduce stress and improve the overall well-being of the animal.
Island not included in investment plans. The body which plans the South East's transport needs to boost the region's economy has published its investment strategy for the next 30 years, and it seems the Isle of Wight is unlikely to benefit from any of the £45 million earmarked for various transport initiatives. Transport for the South East's the TFSE 126-page strategic investment plan has gone out to consultation, and the Isle of Wight appears just 6 times throughout the entire document, each time describing the current situation. There is no mention of the island at all in the Our Visions, Goals and Priorities section. By contrast, Brighton is mentioned 51 times, Southampton 56 and Portsmouth 31 times. Eastbourne, with its population of 103,000 compared to the island's 142,000, gets 58 mentions. Set up in 2017, the Isle of Wight Council has been a member of the body from the start, with membership costing £30,000 a year. There are 16 local authority members and 5 local enterprise partnerships, LEPs, including the Solent LEP, which covers the island. There are also representatives of district and borough authorities and national bodies such as Network Rail. The plan aligns with and supports government priorities to decarbonise the transport system, level up left behind communities and facilitate sustainable economic growth in the South East, and builds on the transport strategy published in 2020, which also mentions the island just 6 times in its 124 pages. It is claimed the investment plans will help generate 21,000 new jobs and unlock growth of £4.1 billion a year by 2050. Despite the chairman, Councillor Keith Glazer, leader of East Sussex County Council, claiming that all modes of transport are covered across the whole of the South East, the document mentions ferries only once, and that is in relation to cross-channel services. Councillor Phil Jordan, Cabinet Member for Transport and Infrastructure, was unimpressed. He said, "When the Alliance took over the council last year, we inherited many legacies of the past. One of these was membership of the TFSE, who, for some time, had been working on a 30-year future transport investment strategy across the region. That has now been published, and I am really disappointed that the island does not appear to be of any significance in this report. I have decided to immediately review our membership of this organisation to see if our annual contribution is good value for the island and for the island community. If it is not, then I will take the decision to resign our membership without hesitation. As people often remind me, every penny counts."
A special anniversary for Shawwell Midsummer Fair. Huge crowds turned up to celebrate the 60th Shawwell Midsummer Fair in the grounds of the village's Northcourt House on Saturday. At the event there was a falconry display, dog demonstration and live music. Organiser Ben Lambert said, "It was great to see so many people after a 2-year absence to help us celebrate our 60th event. The weather was kind to us, although the wind did pick up towards the end, which did not dampen our spirits. Nearly £12,000 was raised overall, which will be donated to local charities and organisations. This is a fantastic effort by all those involved, and thanks goes to the committee, members and helpers, without whom the fair would not be possible. It is amazing to see the local community of Shawwell and those further afield come together on these special occasions. The funds will be distributed at the fair's annual meeting on Friday, September the 23rd, when next year's date will be confirmed."
Hopefully to Seaview. The Hopefully to Seaview event, which took place on Sunday, June the 12th, has so far raised £3,000 for Retina UK, with more to come. The charity funds research and supports people who are going or have gone blind due to inherited sight loss. Raffle prizes included Isle of Wight festival tickets, an overnight stay and meal for two at the boathouse, and an Alamo voucher, with many other prizes donated by businesses in Ryde.
Work urgently needed to Ryde Piers rail track. Ryde Piers railway track could be shut forever without 6 months of closure for critical improvements, civil engineers have warned. An application has been made to the Marine Management Organisation, that's MMO, by Osborne Infrastructure on behalf of Network Rail to make the improvements. Osborne Infrastructure say the railway track on the pier is coming towards the end of its operational life and requires renewal and refurbishment to allow trains to continue to use it safely. The MMO is consulting on the plans, including the extended closure, and comments can be submitted until July the 8th. The proposed work is split into 5 different zones along the stretch of track. Track approaching and stopping on the left side of the Ryde Pier Head platform, Zone 4, is the worst part. It is said to be a critical area for renewal and must be fixed by December. If work isn't carried out, experts say the railway would need to be closed for safety reasons. As part of the work, the boards protecting the station and track from the weather would be refurbished and repairs made to other elements that are heavily corroded. In documents submitted to the MMO as part of the application, it is revealed the stretch of railway track will need to be closed between September 2022 and February 2023 to complete the most serious work. At the same time, Network Rail has requested work to be done in zones 1 to 3 to replace the track and refurbish some of the steel beams to avoid further future disruption. A proposed timeline has been set for the renewal works to be carried out, supposedly starting this month and lasting until February, although until approval is granted, work cannot start.
Newport and Ryde shopfront designs. The appearance of shopfronts in 2 of the island's major towns will change over time if new planning guidance is adopted by the Isle of Wight Council. The Newport and Ryde Commercial Frontage Design Guide aims to protect the identity of the town's historic high streets. It sets out a new standard for commercial properties to ensure their visual appearance enhances the conservation area instead of having a detrimental impact after both towns were accepted into Historic England's High Street Heritage Action Zones programme in 2019. The draft design guide says much of Newport High Street has lost its architectural heritage, with the stretch west of St James's Street particularly affected and characterised by run-down or bland shop fronts of national retail chains. In Ryde, the High Street is said to lack the same place appeal as Union Street, again with national chains interrupting fine historic shop fronts. Now the design guide sets out how shop owners and landlords can redesign or refurbish their building fronts, starting with understanding the building, its heritage, and its assessing it in detail. It says nearly all shop fronts in the town can be improved. The guide includes a design checklist for owners to assess their proposed design, including whether the shop front fits in the existing streetscape, identifies historic details which can be retained and enhanced, and whether the shop is accessible for all. The authority is looking for people's feedback on the draft design guide before it is adopted to the local plan as a supplementary planning document. You can view the draft supplementary design guide at bit.ly/2spg. The consultation runs until midday on August the 1st. Comments can be submitted either via email to policy.consultation@iow.gov.uk or by letter to the Council's Planning Services in Sea Close Office, Fairley Road, Newport, PO30 2QS.
Isle of Wight Council to bid for an island green link. The Isle of Wight Council is bidding in the second round of the government's Levelling Up Fund. Plans are being prepared to enhance travel between Ryde and Yarmouth by improving cycling, walking and bus routes, while also making accessibility improvements. This could include over 20 kilometres, that's 12.5 miles, of new and enhanced cycling and walking routes between Newport and Yarmouth through construction of the long-planned Gunville and West Wight Greenway. The council has launched an online survey to allow anyone who already uses the route between Yarmouth and Ryde to contribute to the bid. Paper copies are also available in libraries and at County Hall, or by emailing pfi@iow.gov.uk, requesting a copy and giving your postal address. Councillor Julie Jones-Evans said, "We've got a few weeks to finalise our bid, and we want to include comments from the people who are already making these journeys. I'm delighted that we might now be able to put these ambitious plans into practice, not just for the West Wight, but extending the route towards Ryde, creating a natural corridor for visitors and locals alike to travel safely and sustainably. The new Greenway will mean that people will depend less on private cars and will improve health, well-being and air quality. The route will also contribute to the Council's Net Zero 2040 target and provide business growth opportunities, just as the Newport Sandown route has done. This new transport bid is bigger and more wide-ranging and will provide benefits across a larger area of the island."
Dispersal order. The Isle of Wight Police put in place a dispersal order in Sandown, which went live on Wednesday night, June the 22nd, and lasted 48 hours. It follows ongoing issues in the area relating to antisocial behaviour, underage drinking and verbal abuse directed at the public, as well as criminal damage including arson at the Ocean Hotel. May speeding offences. After targeting dangerous driving, the Isle of Wight Police have revealed how many driving offences were identified in May, including drug driving, driving without a seatbelt. The team identified 268 driving offences. And then in news in brief, there's a collapsed boardwalk. Hampshire and Isle of Wight Wildlife Trust posted on Facebook yesterday, which is Thursday, announcing the temporary closure of the path from the cycle track to Young Woods Copse Nature Reserve in Alveston. The section has been deemed as unsafe due to a collapsed section of the boardwalk.
Madcap fundraising in memory of Lewis. A father whose 23-year-old son died suddenly last November has embarked on a series of madcap events to raise money for charity. Ian Gregory, 53, from Carisbrooke, suffers from fibromyalgia, a long-term condition which causes pain all over the body. However, he is prepared to break through the pain barrier in memory of his son Lewis, who was a chef at the castle in Newport and the Vine in St Helens, and died from a blood clot on his lungs. Ian is raising money to set up a trust for Lewis's baby daughter Esme, to be used later in her life, and for Prostate Cancer UK. He said, "I won't ever come to terms with Lewis's death. I'm just trying to live without him here with us. I always try to do some kind of event each year to raise money for good causes, and this year it's a whole series of challenges. Usually I do various cycle rides, but this year's will include 2 half marathons and a 10,000 feet tandem skydive. You will be able to hear me scream island-wide." Ian's efforts started with a cold and wet London Landmarks half marathon on April the 3rd. He said, "My body doesn't work too well in the cold, and I have enough pain walking, let alone running. By mile 5 I was so close to giving it up, but all I could think about was Lewis and how proud he would be if I reached the finish line. At mile 9 my body felt numb with the odd nerve pain firing every few steps. A blister had formed on my heel which reminded me I was still alive. Eventually I managed to complete the course, even if it did take me 3 hours 25 minutes, and it took weeks for my blisters to disappear. Since then he has completed 3 bike rides, the London Night 100k and the 102-mile ride London, and last weekend he was off to do the Brecon Beacons for the infamous Dragon Ride Gran Fondo, a 132-mile bike ride with some brutal hill climbs. Ian added, "The pain was truly unbelievable. My sciatic nerve had been firing driving up to Wales, and I knew it was going to be an issue for the ride itself. However, I had not considered the additional pains I would get as I was compensating so much with my right leg. I was so pleased to finish. I just collapsed after I got over the line." Despite being in constant pain, Ian is determined to carry on and added, "I've got another half marathon, the skydive and an ultra bike ride from the Lee Valley to Berlin to look forward to. The thought of Lewis helps me through it all."
Family pub's new owners. Publicans Liam White and Simon Cant have added the Crown Inn Shawwell to their growing business interests. The business partners already own the Castle Inn in Newport, the Vine Inn in St Helens and New Inn in Shalfleet. They will take over managing the Crown on Monday, June the 27th, with the pub initially open for drinks only, with food to follow within a week. Both had previously worked at the pub, which was one of the reasons for taking it over. Liam said, "Part of it was sentimentality, but we also want to bring it back to its former glory, serving a traditional pub menu." Simon added, "When I was here before, it had a good local following and we want it to, once again, be the heart of the community. We are a family-run business and we will have family members working here. I even remember coming here as a child and twice falling into the stream at the back of the pub trying to touch the fish." The couple have taken on a 17-year lease on the pub and have had workmen in this week clearing the grounds and stream as well as decorating the inside of the premises, with the promise of a children's play area to come in the near future.
Long delays in A&E. Patients are experiencing long waits at A&E, and one family told the county press their loved one spent more than 24 hours in St Mary's emergency department before being moved to a ward. The family phoned in distress to say people were spending several hours sitting in discomfort in the waiting room before being treated. The hospital admitted it had failed to meet the national operational standard that week of at least 95% of patients in A&E admitted, transferred or discharged within 4 hours. One person spent 26 hours 39 minutes in A&E, the hospital confirmed. Across the country, more than 1,000 people every day are waiting 12 hours or more in hospital A&E departments, according to a new report by the Royal College of Emergency Medicine. A spokesman for the Isle of Wight NHS Trust said, "During the week of May the 16th, we unfortunately were unable to meet the national operational standard, and patients were in our emergency department for over 4 hours. We apologise for any inconvenience and distress caused to people who had extended waits. Together with our local healthcare partners, we are ensuring patients can be discharged home at the right time. This will help us increase the number of beds available and improve the waiting time. During the week in question, visitors to St Mary's A&E experienced an average wait time of 1 hour 8 minutes from arrival to being seen by a doctor a maximum time of 5 hours 6 minutes. There was an average waiting of 3 hours 47 minutes from the decision to admit to admission. Maximum time 20 hours 53 minutes. Patients spent an average of 4 hours 51 minutes in A&E. Maximum time 26 hours 39 minutes. People should continue to use 999 if they have a serious or life-threatening condition or accident. However, if patients think they need A&E, they should call NHS 111 or use NHS 111 online first to make sure they are getting the right care in the right place.
Hendrix's haunt could be back. It's gone from a rock star's hotel of choice to a run-down derelict eyesore, but new life could be breathed into a prominent Sandown town centre building. The Esplanade Hotel on the High Street has stood empty for years, but plans have been unveiled by Planzer Property Developments to turn the block of buildings into 20 apartments, 14 for residential use and 6 for self-catering holidays. In 1970, while it was the Seagrove Hotel, Jimi Hendrix stayed the night before his famous Isle of Wight festival set. The building has had a checkered history since then, with the hotel last used as budget accommodation before it was sold to its current owners 3 years ago. Despite being in new ownership since 2019, the hotel was already said to be in a state of disrepair, so has not reopened since. Now a sympathetic conversion is planned. Agents BCM say on behalf of the applicants, with the hotel needing extensive renovations and repairs. Planning documents submitted to the Isle of Wight Council say ongoing maintenance costs and overheads for the Victorian buildings are extremely high, and the lower floors have recently been stripped out due to a leak from a water tank. The transformation of part of the hotel into residential use will help fund the renovation works, BCM say, modernising the dated interior and improving the exterior. The agents say the amount of work needed to restore the building would in most cases lead to demolition, but the owner considers it viable to retain and improve it, once again making it an asset to the conservation area. Traditional external detailing would be kept where possible, and each block of the building would be finished in different pastel or neutral colours. The majority of apartments would be 2-bed, some with balconies, but all with sea views over the Sandown Esplanade. You can view the plans 22/00660/FUL on the Isle of Wight Council's planning register, and comments can be submitted until July the 15th.
Cull our schools. Quarter of primary should go to improve standards, says group. A group of Isle of Wight school leaders are calling to scrap a quarter of the island's primary schools. They warn keeping too many schools open risks condemning pupils to a mediocre education long into the future. Earlier this year, a primary pupil places working group was set up, comprising head teachers and chairs of governors, to consider challenges as pupil admission numbers are projected to fall even further. With a potential 1,800 empty places in island primary schools at the start of the upcoming academic year in September, they say the over-provision of places is challenging the efficiency of education settings. Around 270 of those places will be in reception classes, and the group felt unless there was a massive increase of young families moving to the island, 39 increasingly inefficient primary schools could be reduced to closer to 30 more efficient ones. In a statement, the group said, the piecemeal approach taken by recent Isle of Wight Council administrations to address over-provision has been too slow and too limited. There is an acute need now to take an honest and transparent lead, replacing self-protection by elected members and their officers, head teachers and governing bodies with a selfless, aimed with a selfless aim genuinely at placing the education and life chances of island primary pupils at the heart of all our work. In response, the Council's Children's Services Director, Steve Crocker, highlighted the School Places Plan currently being devised to address issues. It will be released in September. The announcement that the rural Chillerton and Rookley Primary School will stay open, however, has led the Pupil Places group to criticise the Council's ruling Alliance administration. The group said the likelihood was that the good reputation of island education would dwindle away, and that the choice of form over substance, a few popular votes over children's education, would be the Alliance's legacy. In keeping the school open, funding across the board would be spread thinner. The group says with less money being spent on individual children's education, but more on overheads. They said, instead of concentrating our best quality leaders, teachers and staff in the right number of efficient, good and better rated schools and giving them enough resources to enhance provision, we will be opting for quantity of schools and places over quality. Isle of Wight Council officers are looking at how the authority can support smaller schools.
Cowes crew learning BSL. Cowes lifeboat station crew has welcomed British Sign Language BSL teacher Melissa Valentine Smith and her guide dog Bridget. Melissa worked with a group of the volunteer crew members to deliver an introductory BSL course over 10 weeks. Melissa presented certificates of completion to some of the crew and was awarded an honorary crew hoodie by Mark Southwell, Cowes Lifeboat Operations Manager. Melissa will be continuing to work with the station, delivering a deaf and blind awareness training course in the coming months. BSL is the preferred language of over 87,000 deaf people in the UK for whom English may also be a second or third language.
Plans for Maplins. Another empty store in Newport could be filled if a national kitchen chain comes to town. Kitchen House, providers of German traditional or modern made-to-measure kitchens, is looking to take over part of the former Maplin store at the Coppins Bridge Retail and Leisure Park. The store is set to open this winter, with signage placed on the building as soon as August the 1st if a planning application is approved. The National Kitchen showroom chain has nearly 60 stores across the country. It would join other big names such as the Gym Group, Cineworld, Pizza Hut, Burger King and KFC at the Coppins Bridge location. Plans would see the former electronics store divided into two, with the kitchen showroom filling a 1,800 square foot unit. Maplin closed its island store and subsequently its online brand in 2018. You can view the signage plans 22-00954-ADV on the Isle of Wight Council's planning register. Comments can be submitted until July the 15th.
Remembering the original Newport Market and weekly livestock sales. Readers of a certain age will remember the original Newport Market. Every Tuesday, cows, pigs and sheep waited to be auctioned in their pens on the site now occupied by Morrison's supermarket, and where food aisles now stand, all variety of market traders would set out their stalls. The stalls ranged from one-man stands to lorries with drop-down sides forming stages or counters. Usually from the mainland, the larger stalls sold everything from bed linen to crockery, and from jewellery to baked beans. There was even a butcher's shop, local wags claiming that some of the joints had been running at Newmarket the day before. At one stall, a man sold glass cutters week after week. He would effortlessly cut out intricate shapes and patterns and in just a few seconds produce tiny masterpieces. Sometimes it was letters of the alphabet, sometimes the outline of a salmon leaping, carried out in a dazzling series of manoeuvres that put the rest of us in casualty to be stitched up. The stallholders were seasoned entertainers. One, a middle-aged scruffy man with designer stubble before it became fashionable, sold nothing but tights. As he played the crowd, flecks of white spittle would gather in the corners of his mouth until an explosive syllable would send them flying into the crowd. He would attack a pair of tights with a nail file, shouting, "Look at these tights, they're indestructible. You can't get 'em here. I got 'em from the exhibition." It was always the exhibition. He never specified which particular one. Wally Pierce, seasoned stallholder from Cowes, sold homemade TV boosters. Simple affairs costing pennies to produce. They consisted of nothing more than a short length of coax cable with a capacitor soldered on the end, which, to maintain an air of mystery, was hidden under plastic tape. As the crowd looked on, Wally plugged a booster into a portable television, and as if by magic, a perfect picture appeared. It was an impressive demonstration that owed more to the fact that the powerful 500 kilowatt Rowwich transmitter was just 2 miles away, rather more than it did to Wally's electronics. At the distance, a coat hanger stuffed in the aerial socket would have given a good picture. Wally did a good trade with the coachloads of tourists that swelled the crowds, but back home, where the nearest transmitter might be 50 miles away, it's a pretty safe bet that the snowy screens of Swansea and Macclesfield remained as snowy as ever.
Wight and Pittis held livestock auctions at each market. They were popular with farmers and public alike. All was well until the early 1980s, when more and more island farmers found it more profitable to take their animals to the mainland markets for auction. Island sales were badly hit, and Pittis and Wight both decided to end their auctions. The annual Gilton Market of 1983 was chosen to be the last ever regular livestock market held on the island. The Gilton Market traditionally took place every Christmas, when the horns of the animal judged best of market were anointed with gold paint. Coast to Coast, the TVS local news programme, was there to record the last ever market. Tom Glennie, Wight auctioneer, was interviewed. "It's a matter of economics," he told viewers. "The throughput on an average Tuesday market has got so small that it's not economic to keep it going. The problem is there isn't nearly enough stock. There are expenses in running a market, and if there are only 20 or 30 calves, it doesn't cover the running costs. It's because it hasn't been supported by the larger farmers." Colin Fairweather and I not only photographed the last market, but also made a sound recording, and we did our own interview with Tom Glennie, who told us, "I will be auctioning in the new year because I've got a farm sale on the stocks, but I don't suppose I should be doing market work ever again. People see it on this day of the year and it looks marvellous, but it's the other 51 weeks of the year that matter, and they are a dead loss." Moments later he held the last ever livestock auction on the island. Now we come to the important bit. There he is, the Gilton Market beast, the property of Alan Aylett, farmer. Congratulate him on a beautiful bullock. Put him in. What am I bid for him? Who wants him? 120 I'm bid. 125, 130, 135, 138 if you like him. In less than a minute it was all over. Selling at 172 pence per kilo to Mr. Bartlett. The crowd, knowing they had just witnessed the end of an era, broke into spontaneous applause, and as the cheers died away, so did Newport Market. In the new year, the traders' stalls relocated to a site at the junction of South Street and Furlongs, now home to Cineworld and fast food outlets. But the new market was a shadow of its former self. Shopping habits had changed and its heyday had passed. It was the beginning of the end, and the market slowly faded away. And now my view from Catherine James. Happy days are here again. I recently drove to Halifax to visit the spectacular Peace Hall. I found a parking space almost adjacent, but the process to pay to park was exasperating. The machine did not take coins, nor, surprisingly, could I use my debit card to make a contactless payment. No, for the privilege of leaving my car curbside, Calderdale Council boasts that parking in Halifax town centre has been made easier with cashless payment options to simply the parking process from both a customer and operational point of view. As far as I could deduce, the simplification was not to my benefit, and the options were actually one option. Download the APCOA app or bugger off, and if I used the app, then a convenience fee would apply. The lure of the Peace Hall was enough for me to overcome my ire, so I stood in the street fumbling with my smartphone. Having found and downloaded the app, I registered my vehicle, name and other personal information, including my debit card details, before buying parking time, which, despite all that fannying about, was limited to a maximum of 2 hours. I certainly wasn't getting any additional convenience, as far as I could tell, so what the extra fee was for, Lord knows. A day or so later I was in Leeds. There, on-street parking is facilitated by app called Ringo. On the island, public car parks use pay by phone. My employer insists I pay to park at work via the ludicrously named My Permit. Surely theirs, not mine. So many apps, so little choice. After all, even if you contact the app company to buy your parking session over the phone, ultimately you still need a mobile. Using cash to park and taking subversive delight in handing an unexpired ticket to a fellow motorist was one of my life's simple wins. With an app, ticket swapping is not allowed. In fact, it's not even possible. Not everyone has a pocket full of chinking coins, so I understand the attraction of cashless payments, even via a pesky app. So why am I so piqued by parking apps? It's the collection of personal data and surveillance of our daily micro-movements by private companies and the authorities which contract their services to them, which irks me. Time, place, date, payment method, all logged and recorded in cyberspace. More importantly, the dependence on app-based solutions disenfranchises many people. Not everyone has a smartphone, and of those who do, some might be on pay-as-you-go, so will be charged for the privilege to download an app, plus its galling convenience fee. Today I read that Transport Secretary Grant Shapps is proposing to do away with railway ticket offices, pushing all travel purchases online. Once again, effectively monitoring citizens' journeys. Many people will embrace the save time, do it online message, but for the technically challenged, it might mean the difference between letting the train take the strain or staying at home. It begs the question, who are these systems for, us or them?
Now coming on to public information. Headline that reads, I will use every chance to bang the drum for the Isle of Wight. Following a recent Commons debate, the issue of funding for the Isle of Wight Council is again under the spotlight. Over many decades, governments have failed to take the island's unique circumstances into account. Because of this historical injustice and the need to right it, I will use every opportunity to bang the drum for the island. And if that includes seeking reassurances prior to supporting the Prime Minister in the recent confidence vote, so be it. Sadly, rather than having any understanding of how the pursuit of additional local government funding sits alongside gains already secured for the Isle of Wight, extra capital investments for the NHS, higher education and the Island Line, ensuring the future of shipbuilding in East Cowes, etc., Labour MPs in Parliament were more interested in suggesting that there is something improper about a constituency MP, me, using their position to fight for their community. It's a bizarre accusation and helps explain why Labour has so few MPs. Surely an MP seeking to exert influence for the good of their constituents is something which any elected representative should be doing. And the facts support our case. Other islands in the UK get a special deal. I want the same for us. The island is almost twice the size of most constituencies, and clearly we are separated by sea from the mainland. I have to work harder than the average MP to get a hearing. I don't mind doing so. This job is a labour of love. But I make no apologies for speaking with passion and determination, no apologies for fighting tooth and nail for the interests of the island, and no apologies for using what leverage I have. As regards the Council's funding, the government has now accepted that the island is a special case. This was a big step forward, the first time it has happened. I'm not looking for a unilateral quick fix, but a long-term settlement. In order for it to be justified, an Isle of Wight settlement must be one of the outcomes of the England-wide Fair Funding Review, delayed because of COVID. Working with councillors and others, I have been delivering a better deal for the island for several years now. There is always more to do, but I will always fight to get the best outcomes I can for the island. If that upsets MPs representing other constituencies, so be it.
And now some items of entertainment that will be going on. The Simon and Garfunkel story is back at Shanklin Theatre this Sunday, June the 26th at 7:30pm. Using projections of pictures and film footage, this 50th anniversary celebration will feature a full live band performing all the hits. Tickets are £22.50 online at bit.ly/IWO/Simon and Garfunkel. And the Outside Track award-winning band, fronted by 4 women, will be performing on their 15th anniversary tour at the Anthony Minghella Theatre in Key Arts, Newport, with their blend of Canadian, Scottish and Irish music and song. On Wednesday, June the 29th, doors are open from 7:30pm. Tickets are £17 on the door.
And the Isle of Wight Jazz Weekend is on from the 15th to the 18th of September and features Leanne Carroll Trio, Sarah Dowling Quartet, Alan Barnes plus 11, O'Higgins and Luft, Karen Sharp Trio, Nigel Price Organ Quartet, It's Trad Dad, Hexagonal, Tribute to Modern Jazz Quartet, Dave Newton and Ewan Stevenson Duo. And plus more still to be booked, and plus local fringe gigs, and the tickets are on sale now and can be obtained from the website, which is iwjazzweekends.co.uk. Then at Shanklin Theatre, we've got on the Saturday the 25th of June at 7:30 the California Dreamers. On Sunday the 26th of June at 7:30 the Simon and Garfunkel Story, which is a rescheduled date. And then from the 30th of June through to the 22nd of September on various dates beyond the West End. Theatre Train presents The Little Mermaid on the 9th of July and the 10th of July. The Wall of Floyd is on the 15th of July, and on the 16th of July, Hello Again, a tribute to Neil Diamond.
And now for some letters. Ferry costs stop us returning, from Alan Smith in Effingham, Surrey. Last year my wife and I went to the Isle of Wight Steam Railway's 1940s weekend. We were part of a reenactment group, so we were committed to go. We've been on a number of occasions before and thoroughly enjoyed the events. I couldn't believe the price of the ferry crossing from Portsmouth to Fishbourne. It was nearly £150 return. There was also the hotel and eating costs on top. We also spent money at the event. We are not going this year due to the exorbitant ferry crossing. The Isle of Wight economy is now going to lose our custom.
Check facts first from Bob Blezard in Sandown. Councillor Churchman needs to check her facts before making baseless allegations. She accuses me of being part of the ruling council group that commissioned and took delivery of the current Cowes floating bridge. I, along with 3 other councillors, left the independent group in September 2014, 18 months before the floating bridge was commissioned. Perhaps Vanessa is desperately looking for scapegoats to deflect attention away from the fact that she and her colleagues did not resolve the problems during the 4 years they were in power. Councillor Churchman asks if I share or take responsibility for cuts to staffing levels in the planning department during the year or so that I chaired the planning committee. She will, of course, be aware that chairing the planning committee is a quasi-judicial function and not one involved with staffing levels and budgets, which rests with the cabinet. When the independent administration imploded in 2017, a cross-chamber coalition was formed in order to set a legal budget. This was made up of members of 3 groups, not just Conservatives, and 4 members of the cabinet were non-Conservatives. To now describe it as a Conservative-led is to do an injustice to those other councillors who stepped forward to ensure that the council operated legally. It is just a pity that after the 2017 election, Dave Stewart's Conservative administration reverted to type-throwing consensus, working out of the window. Vanessa mentions that I stood as a Lib Dem in the 2017 election. I'm not sure what that has to do with the price of fish. I stood as a Liberal Dem in 4 out of the last 5 local elections, the exception being 2013, when I left the party for a time as a protest over Nick Clegg's leadership during the coalition years.
Thatcher Truths from Dave Talbot in Ryde. In his My View column on the 17th of June, Jim Gibbons writes, Mrs. Thatcher acted decisively, proportionally and rightly vis-à-vis coal miners and the Falkland Islands invasion. I question this view. In February 1981, the Coal Board announced plans for 50 pit closures and the loss of 30,000 jobs. Following a U-turn by Mrs. Thatcher's government, the provision of more state money for coal mines was granted. Consequently, Joe Gormley, president of the miners at that time, said a strike was no longer necessary. Enthused by her emphatic general election victory in June 1983 and a less than tactical miners' president, namely Arthur Scargill, Prime Minister Mrs. Thatcher set about the destruction and near-complete closure of all coal mines, with almost total policy success and 100% success in vindictiveness and mining community destruction. Currently, the UK imports about 624,000 metric tonnes of coal per annum. Regarding the Falkland Islands, Mrs. Thatcher had no option other than to respond to the aggression by Argentina's General Galtieri. If the Falkland Islands' sovereignty was lost to Argentina, then so too would have been Mrs. Thatcher's premiership. It was the proposal by the First Sea Lord, Admiral Sir Henry Leach, that a task force of frigates, destroyers, troop carriers, etc., with Royal Marines, paratroopers and special forces be dispatched. Mrs. Thatcher backed the proposal because, to coin a phrase, there was no alternative. Ironically, the aircraft carrier HMS Hermes, the flagship, was at the time destined for the scrap heap, and the aircraft carrier HMS Invincible effectively sold to Australia. Had General Galtieri invaded the Falklands a year or two later, then the UK's fighting facilities and capabilities would have been significantly reduced and the outcome open to conjecture. I suspect Mr. Gibbons holds Mrs. Thatcher in high regard. My view is she was a devastator, the effects of which continue to be felt today. She was probably right, though, in November 1990 when she said, "It's a funny old world."
And that's it from us for today. So it's goodbye from me, Morris.
And it's goodbye from me, Madeline.
Museums and exhibitions. For some visually impaired people, the element of touch is very important when trying to establish what a piece of artwork looks like. This prompted listener Mike Lambert to contact the programme following a visit to the World of Stonehenge exhibition at the British Museum. Mike was unhappy that he wasn't able to handle some of the stone items displayed at the exhibition, and he explains to Peter a series of other access concerns that he has. We put these concerns to the museum's Equality and Diversity Manager, Will Westwood. We also take a look at the Barbara Hepworth Museum and Sculpture Garden in St Ives. Here they ensure that visually impaired visitors are catered for with touch tours, 3D printings of the sculptures and more. We pay a remote visit to the garden with Georgina Kennedy, the museum's public programme curator.
BBC Sounds, music, radio, podcasts.
Good evening and welcome to In Touch. And very rarely has this programme's name seemed so appropriate.
Perhaps the best thing of all about being director of the British Museum, and one that still gives me the most enormous thrill, is that now and then I'm allowed to take some of the objects out of the cases and hold them. And today I'm being allowed to hold something absolutely astonishing. I've got to admit that if any of us saw this just lying on the ground, we'd probably walk past it. It looks like a large, chipped grey cobble. This is one of the first things that humans ever consciously made, and holding it puts me directly in touch with them.
Neil McGregor, as he said, formerly director of the British Museum, starting his iconic series, A History of the World in 100 Objects, by waxing lyrical about the joy of touch. Mike Lambert would agree. Mike is a totally blind enthusiast for archaeology and geology, and he got in touch with us because he feels let down by the British Museum in its approach to access for visually impaired people for a current exhibition, The World of Stonehenge. Mike joins me. First of all, just explain what it is that's so upset you.
Well, basically the lack of any access arrangements during a visit that I made to this show. I'd been to other British Museum special shows in the past, and they'd always had audio guides, braille guides, or there were some objects that were available for handling. And when I went to the show, there was nothing. The only access that I had to things was via the labels that my companions were willing to read me. And I felt there was a complete absence of imagination or thought for visually impaired people.
And when you approached the museum about this, what were you told? What was the reaction?
Well, first of all, I contacted them 2 weeks before I went, asking what was available. And I didn't hear from William Westwood, the manager for Equality, Diversity and Access, until 6 weeks later, but offered all sorts of illogical excuses about why this hadn't been possible. COVID, of course, was mentioned, even though COVID restrictions had ended. It was said that in order to handle things, there had to be these special hands-on desks, which I'd never heard of before, but the museum believes are essential for blind people to touch things. I was told that the arranging of these desks would take over a year to do. I was told that the items were on loan. Eventually, I was told that the British Museum had decided not to continue offering audio and braille guides because of the expense, and that none of the registered items in the collection were available for handling by the public, and that was a blanket ban.
But Mike, COVID was a reality. It did cause a good deal of confusion and perturbation. There have been both an audio described session and there was a Zoom exhibition as well, aimed at visually impaired people. That's not exactly ignoring your needs, is it?
Well, let's talk about the Zoom sessions. When I was informed about these, first of all, I was given incorrect dates. They weren't advertised when I booked my tickets, first of all. They seemed like an afterthought. And as a result, only 5 people showed up on the evening. I went back to the museum for that audio described event. And apart from myself, the other 4 had all heard about it through Vocalise, who were the organisation providing the audio description. So there's a complete failure of advertising, forethought.
Nonetheless, as someone who, deeply values old objects, you would understand their sense of responsibility for ensuring that these objects aren't damaged in any way.
Yes, I do. And I understand there's many precious items that need protection and are not suitable for handling. But I wasn't asking to touch the Dead Sea Scrolls. I was asking to touch items that are made of stone, which would suffer not at all from being handled. There were some items that were what they call ring and cut markings that were on boulders that had been outside, exposed to the elements for thousands of years before they were brought into museums, and we weren't allowed to touch these. So I just think they're completely wrapped up in their rules and regulations.
You have actually been to Stonehenge. What happened when you went there?
The site now is restricted for most people, can only go, on a kind of viewing platform around. But I was allowed in with my companions, and quite rightly too, to get an experience, because otherwise it's totally inaccessible.
So in a nutshell, what do you want to know from the museum and what do you want them to do about it?
Well, I'd like them to have a good think about what they're doing from the top. I'd like them to think about what they've said about saving money by not doing Braille and audio guides. And I'd like them to take a sensible approach to handling of things. It's not on that people, whose only access would be through touch shouldn't be allowed to handle things. I think they've completely got the cart before the horse.
Well, that was Mike Lambert. Well, listening to that is Will Westwood. He is the Equality and Diversity Manager for the department which ran that exhibition. Will, you can hear how disappointed Mike is. What do you say to him and the points that he's made?
Listening to that, I can hear his disappointment, and we, as an institution, agree with a lot of what Mike says about wanting to do better, and we've found a lot of his feedback very beneficial. There are some things which I feel like maybe there was a bit of misunderstanding at some points about explanations.
I'll give you, just before you deal with that, if you agree with a lot of what he says, why haven't those things been done?
Well, they're being in the process of being done. I think that his feedback around the promotion of the events, we've really taken that on board and really thank him for pointing that out. And we're looking at the future about how we can integrate those events more into our sort of more general advertising campaigns and how we can spread the word out a lot better.
Because that's the sense that he gets, I think, that this is being kind of shoved to one side. It's not really being taken seriously.
I can really hear that. I'm sure you understand there's lots of stakeholders that might make changes a little bit slower than people would like. But I absolutely agree with the sentiment that we need to keep striving to do that.
Can I ask you specifically about the issue of touch, which is at the heart of this? And Mike makes the point that a lot of these things, they're very durable materials. They've been out in the air for, millions of years. I can't quite understand why these rules are so rigid about touch.
For the audio described tour that Miss Lambert attended, there was an opportunity to touch objects that they weren't on display in the exhibition, but were related and from the department.
But why couldn't they touch the ones that were actually in the exhibition, the real thing?
So 3 major points I would say is the first is that many of the objects in the exhibition, particularly some of the show-stopping objects, were on loan, and we unfortunately don't dictate the terms of those loans. The specifics on how those loans are decided would be individual to each contract signed. So I'm not aware of the sort of discussion that happens for the loan of each object.
But it
So
would seem illogical that Mike could touch them at Stonehenge, but not when they're on loan.
Yes, and again, that would depend on the institution that was providing the loan. There are object handling collections as well, which are quite large. So I don't think it would necessarily be fair to say that within the museum there isn't a lot of objects to handle. There's just sort of, we have different categorisations for that. So
I don't quite understand. What's the significance of a registered item as opposed to an unregistered item?
It's about the collection care, and it's about sort of tracking how these objects are looked after. So objects that get agreed that can be handling objects are then sort of stored separately and looked after in a separate way.
I mean, Mike said you seem to be very much caught up in rules and not you personally, but maybe the institution. One wonders whether some of these rules and regulation aren't completely out of date.
That may be a very fair point, but it depends on if we're talking about we want more handling opportunities for people. That is something that we are moving forward with currently. The volunteers team are in the process of reopening the handling desks that exist throughout the gallery. And in the up and coming exhibitions that we're kind of designing, each will go back to the standard, which was having a handling desk that unfortunately Stonehenge, we weren't able to provide for one.
What's a handling desk? I mean, in order to look at stuff, you need a flat table?
So teams would need to decide which objects are going to be used. We've got to think about where they're going to be stored, how they're going to be looked after, as well as training people on how to deliver those sessions and instruct other people on how to handle the objects. It's the storage, it's the staffing, it's the capacity, along with all those things.
One more thing, because I think we've dealt with those, even if Mike is not entirely satisfied with that answer. Is it true that the museum decided not to continue offering audio and braille guides? And if so, why?
So it's a little bit before my time at the museum. I believe the museum stopped offering the braille and the audio described guides specifically for special exhibitions back in 2017, I believe was the last one.
And do you know why they decided that? Are we talking about money here?
We've decided to put the resources we do have into these audio described tours. Although, having said that, speaking with Mike and speaking with other people has sort of hit home how restrictive that can be. And so I am currently investigating ways in which we might be able to, again, instigate an audio guide for the special exhibitions and different ways in which we might be able to manage that. Another change is that for our new exhibition, which will be coming up, the one that will go after Stonehenge, we've integrated a lot more objects that would be available to touch. We sort of implemented that, and that's being much more built into the exhibition itself.
And as you seemed to have a bit of trouble with knowing how to advertise that, can I give you the opportunity on In Touch, which a lot of visually impaired people listen to tell us what that exhibition is?
I think it's got a working title at the moment, but it'll all be about how the hieroglyphs were deciphered and showcasing the Rosetta Stone.
Right. Well, I'm sure Mike and many other visually impaired people will be interested in that. Will Westwood, thank you very much for talking to us. Well, Mike Lambert has listened to that interview. Mike, can I ask for your reactions?
I'm disappointed that, as I understand it, Will opted before this programme that he didn't want to speak to me directly. I think that's very disappointing, and that we have to do it in this to and fro way. In terms of what he said about improvements, I'm keen that they improve, and I should feel very good about that when I visit their show next. But it's all in terms of what will happen and what will improve. And the basic thing that I come back to is that these things were better before 2017, as he says. Things have got worse. And I look forward to going to the show about hieroglyphs, and I wonder how they will deal with access to the Rosetta Stone. We'll see.
We shall see. Mike Lambert, thank you very much indeed. And the good news is that by no means all of you have had disappointing museum experiences, as you've been telling us. Harriet Smith from Northampton emailed,
Every month, the Oxford University Museums hold touch tours for visually impaired people, which I attend quite regularly. Each tour covers a different topic, from storytelling to examining fossils, exploring ancient calculators, and looking at how medicines have changed over the years. They are always so interesting, and Susan Griffiths, the lady who organises them, puts in a huge amount of effort into each one.
And blind couple Sue and Geraint have also had happy examples of museum access.
A few years ago, while on a group holiday, we went to the Lakeland Motor Museum. With 10 visually impaired and blind people in our group, we were allowed to touch all the vehicles. We appreciated being able to feel the lovely shapes of the cars, the motorcycles and bicycles. At the end of our visit, my sister was having a good laugh because a man was following us around with a duster, polishing the vehicles after we had touched them.
And Mike Lambert also wanted to direct us to what he felt was an example of how it should be done. At St Ives in Cornwall, as a memorial to the internationally renowned sculptor, you'll find the Barbara Hepworth Museum and Sculpture Garden, which has gone to great lengths to welcome visually impaired visitors. Its public programme curator, Georgina Kennedy, set the scene for me.
So I'm in the sculpture garden of the Barbara Hepworth Museum, quite private and intimate. It's very much a space of its own. And I'm standing in the far corner next to a work called Conversation with Magic Stone. So behind me, there's some bamboo planted, which you might hear creaking and the leaves kind of rustling about in the breezes.
Well, I wasn't sure what was the bamboo and what was the seagull.
There's some seagulls too.
Right. For a visually impaired person coming along to the garden, what are the highlights and what would they be able to do?
The building itself was formerly Hepworth's home and her workspace, her studio. So when you're coming into it, it doesn't feel like you're walking into a sort of static museum or gallery. It's very much a historic building that you're coming in. So in terms of smells and sounds, the creaky floorboards, you feel that, you feel the space. And then you come into the garden, so you've got the smells of the garden as well and the planting. So there's lots of sensory kind of exposure that's not just visual.
And what about the sculptures themselves? How much access do you get to those?
So the sculptures both inside the building and outside in the garden. In the garden we have a little bit more of a relaxed touch policy. Obviously we do have a responsibility for conservation and we do manage that, and within a touch tour situation we can get a little bit more in-depth with touch, but people can touch most of the sculptures in the garden. There is different levels and steps. It's not a fully accessible space as you would expect from this kind of environment.
Now, you've also done 3D representations, I think, of the sculptures. Can you just explain how that works?
So I suppose we're interested in exploring ways we can create experiences which not only allow for an understanding of the artwork, but also take someone on a journey in their own interpretation and learning about the artwork. And so within our Touch Tour programme, we have made a resource for the work that I'm standing next to now, actually, Conversation with Magic Stones. And this work, it has 3 tall, figure-like large columns, and then it has 3 of these, what Hepworth referred to as magic stones. And the stones are large, they're up to my waist in height. There's the illusion that they're actually completely different, but they're not. If you turn them onto the same side, you would see that. So we work with an artist called Vicky Wiltshire, and she was interested to make a resource around these works in particular. Part of that resource includes these 3D printed versions of them, so they're handheld versions of these 3 stones. What Vicky was really interested in was this idea of haptic perception, which is a kind of touch perception. It literally means the ability to grasp something. So if you hold it in your hand, you can turn it around to feel its texture, which you can't do if it's a large work. You can obviously press it, see how hard it is. You can hold it and feel its weight. You can trace its contours to get the sense of the shape. And I think importantly, with a small object, you can enclose it in your hands. You can feel the whole thing. If you're blind or partially sighted, you can't necessarily feel the whole form because of the scale of the work. So what these small scale, they're effectively replicas. You know, they're 3D prints, exactly the same shape with the same surface decoration is all recreated on them.
And there is also there what was known as Tate St Ives, which is a museum. Well, it's an art gallery, really, isn't it? Do you use these techniques there as well?
Sure. Well, we have a broader programme at Tate called Talking Art. The Talking Art series really allows us to look at works we can't necessarily touch, so particularly works that are being loaned in that aren't in our collection. And we use audio description, as people would expect, but we also try to use all sorts of other resources, handling materials and magnifiers and minimisers and images that you can look up close to. We have SciChem, raised line drawings, and those sessions are very much about broadening what you get through an audio description, but also coupling that up with a really practical, hands-on session so that you get to experience some of the processes that the artist that you're looking at is using or is related to the themes that we're talking about in those works that you can't touch. All of those things I've talked about are specifically for people who are blind or partially sighted. So although actually we've realised it's beneficial to anybody, it was specifically made for our Touch Talk programme for that audience.
Georgina Kennedy. And that's it for today. Your comments and experiences always welcome. You can email in touch at bbc.co.uk, leave voice messages on 0161 836 1338 and go to the website for more information. That's bbc.co.uk/in touch. From me, Peter Wight, producer Beth Hemmings and studio managers Colin Sutton and Jonathan Esp, goodbye.
Scaffolding and skips news for the week commencing the 27th of June. In the Newport area, the Old Mill, St Cross Lane, Lighthouse Medical Centre, 62 Crocker Street, Exchange House, St Cross Lane, Newport Minster, St Thomas's Square, 29A Lugley Street and St James Street, Chantry House, Pyle Street, 15 High Street, 127 to 128 Superdrug High Street. In Cowes, 82 Park Road. And in Ryde, 21A and 22A Cross Street. The Crown Inn Pub, St Thomas's Square to High Street. 3 Cross Street. Ryde Masonic Hall, John Street. 42 George Street, and skips in Ryde, 21A to 22A Cross Street, 50 Harding Road, The Cottage, Upper Green Road, St Helens.
In Seaview, Warren Boats in Blewett Avenue, Seaview Skips outside the Buccaneers in Fairy Road, Sandown, 20 High Street, Vintner, 2 High Street, 24 Spring Hill, Castle Cliff, Castle Road, Ash Farm, Vintner Road, Whitwell. Vintner Skips, Touchdown in St Albans Road, and in the freshwater area, Hose Roads, Shirley House, Avenue Road and High Street.